I'm Matt Booker.
And I'm Dave Laird. And welcome to a super cool 2016 best year ever year in review episode of the Great Concavity. And so, Matt, welcome, man. It is episode 24.
24.
And as is our custom, we get to talk about the last year because it's the early part of January right now.
It still feels like 2016, but I guess we've flipped the calendar over into 2017. And so
we have. I wonder if like 2016 feels for a lot of people like a Sisyphusian nightmare where they're just infinitely rolling the ball up and down the hill.
You can't
I don't
escape
know.
it.
Perhaps. We right before we did this, we solicited some of the listeners' thoughts on Twitter about things they want to hear us talk about, and someone said anything but Trump. That was the first comment we got. So let's try and circumnavigate that topic a little bit, I suppose, if we can, and try and maybe focus on some of our favorite things of the last year.
Well, I think maybe you asked at the wrong time of the day, and if you asked at a different time of day, maybe some of our UK followers would say anything but Brexit, or you would get a different response depending on which time zone you post that question in.
Totally.
But
we didn't give a lot of window of time either. It was about an hour and a half or something too. So,
but I think Trump is universally hated, so that's just my opinion. But
yeah, that was pretty clear from the Golden Globe Awards last night. Did you happen to watch that?
I did. I thought that was a really impressive speech by
Meryl Streep. Yeah, that was out of control.
I should back up and say I did not watch the Golden Globes. I just watched Twitter.
Yes.
And that's how I
probably
consumed
more entertaining.
the highlights of the Golden Globes was through Twitter. So
yeah, nice.
So I've been working on my list of best of the year, and I know that you have a best list of the year, and I realize I have about 0 movies or music or anything else. Mine's like all books.
All books. Well, mine is almost the reverse of that. So I'll cover most of the non-literary areas, and I'll make a few bookish comments. But my year, well, at least the first half of my year was all just buried in scholarship stuff, with the thesis and the defense and writing stuff for the conference and rereading Infinite Jest for Infinite Winter and stuff like that. So I don't have a lot of like novels that I got to this year, but I've started to in the last few months, so that's been quite refreshing.
Good. Yeah. What was the date of your defense again? So
that was July 15th.
Okay, so that is about half the year, right?
Yeah. Someone asked me on email today if I felt relieved to be done the MA, and I said, yeah, it is relieving. I get to read books again, which is nice. But at the same time, I still get to read a lot of Wallace scholarship for the show, so I still feel plugged in to the academic side of things too, which is good.
I saw a funny tweet the other day that said, watching a TV episode all the way through without checking your phone now counts as reading a book.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I just multitask with that all the time.
It's really bad how addicted. I'm addicted to my phone, and I'm still coping with that. And I try to go through phases where I don't look at it, but it's very tempting all the time.
It is. Yeah, there's something very alluring about it, about that brick. So how is life for Matt Booker in 2016, apart from like geopolitical nonsense?
For me personally, it was a very good year, a very strange year, and that I went through a couple of job changes, which that had not happened to me in many years, and I ended up with a really great job, so I'm really happy with how the year ended for me. Yeah. And I had 1 month of the year, about most of July, where I didn't have a job, and it was fantastic. Because
I thought you were going to say super stressful.
I mean, there's always stress, right? You can choose that or not, but it was fantastic for me personally just to have a break from just that mental space of rearranging your life. After you do something every day for 5, 6, 7 years, 10 years, and then just to sort of have a break from it mentally where you literally can't do it.
Yeah, it's a cathartic purge.
It was rearranged my mind in some ways, but I enjoyed that time because I love the summer. I'm very much a hot weather person living down here on this side of the concavity.
Yeah, you live in the right place then.
So I just went to the pool all the time and kind of lived in a swimsuit, and it was fantastic. So
that's right.
that was... I try not to look at, because this celebrity died or, this geopolitical events. For me personally, it was a good year. So that's good, I can't call it a dumpster fire completely.
Yeah, wasn't that so? Like some linguistic society named that the word of the year,
dumpster fire.
2016. Yep. Dumpster fire. I love that word. I think that's fantastic.
How was your overall year in review? I mean, we've already mentioned the MA.
I was thinking about this the other day, that actually 2016 for me personally was a great year. So I don't know if I've mentioned this on the show yet, but Rachel, who was our guest a few episodes ago, who's my wife, is currently with child. So that'll be our first human baby. So she's just entered her 3rd trimester as of like this week. So coming up in April here, there will be another concavity baby.
Do you have the due date? What's the due date?
April 9th.
April 9th.
And it's a girl.
It's a girl. Found out. Congrats.
Yeah, so we're pretty psyched. You didn't know it was a girl? I didn't tell you that. I'm sorry.
I did not know that.
It's a girl. So we've been we had a boy's name totally picked up, ready to rock, and then we found out it was a girl, and now it's been just toiling over a lot of lists and a lot of websites, and we have very different parameters for what names we like. So it's a bit of a... It'll be interesting to see what we come up with, but I'm sure it'll be okay. If you have any names, like if listeners have any cool girls' names that are like, not super popular, because that's one of Rachel's criteria, is it can't be in the top 100.
Yeah.
So if you have any cool names, hit me up on Twitter, and you can send some possible suggestions. Maybe we'll do like a name contest later or something.
See,
in a month.
I think it's a good idea. My firstborn, he was also born in April, and because I have such a weird last name, I kind of wanted him to have a normal first name, like somewhat common first name. But then with my second one, we were very much on board with that, like do something a little different, just like, because there's this weird thing that happens where no matter how weird of a name you pick, almost instantly you'll meet someone else with that name. So like you could name your kid like Butterfly Trash Can, and someone else will be like, there's another kid in our class named Butterfly. It's like, what? I never heard that until today. And I don't know if it's like confirmation bias or what, but
you're right. Yeah,
it totally will happen where you'll name your kid something that you think is unique, and there will be like a million other, not a million, but it'll come up.
Yeah, that's good. So the day that Rachel told me that she was pregnant was in late July, when I was the first day of the Wallace conference in Illinois. So she'd been trying to get in touch with me all day, but I didn't have Wi-Fi.
She told you over the phone?
Not quite. I didn't have Wi-Fi, and I didn't have data, because like data roaming's expensive in the US with a Canadian phone. So I got home to the house at night, and then my phone just blew up with all these texts and stuff. And then I texted her, and I was like, "Hey, I'm here. What's up?" And called her, and then she texted me a picture of 2 positive pregnancy tests. And then we talked on the phone, FaceTimed right after that. So that was like actually one of the best days, I think, of my life in recent memory that I can remember. Because the first day of the conference was awesome. I got to do a panel. I got to like lead a panel, and then I gave my talk. So I was relieved that was over. And the day was just really fun, and it was great to talk to people and, go out for drinks and stuff like that. And then I got this news when I got home, and then I came out of the room, and
you could just party, man.
Rob Short and like Ryan Marnane and a bunch of people were hanging out, and I didn't tell any of them that night, but I kind of just like I told a few of them over the weekend, and then at Denny's on the last morning I told everybody, and it was very celebratory. So that was good.
Oh man, that's awesome, and I can't wait until the conference this year. You know, I was not able to make it last year, but everyone who went just, you know, it was a highlight of their year. So, you know, if you're out there, like, go to the conference in Illinois.
Yes.
Like,
if you're interested in David Foster Wallace and scholarly studies related to him, show up in Illinois in June. It's going to be a good time. Even if you're not presenting, even if you're, I mean, I didn't present at my first Wallace conference in Paris a couple of years ago. I just went and I just soaked it in and made friends, and it was great.
Is it in May or June?
It's in June.
Okay.
Yeah.
I gotta book that trip because it is a highlight of the year. But
yeah, that's a good one.
All right.
It's really good. June 8th through 10th.
All right.
So Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Sold.
Yeah. This year was also good. I finished my master's, so that was a huge relief. We moved to a different city. That's been a big life change. We also got to announce a cool thing. I guess we announced in 2017.
Can you stop right there? Let's go back to you moved to the new city. Victoria, you know, someone on Twitter also asked about, we had a back and forth with a couple of people about sports.
Yes.
And I wanted to stop you right there and say that I thought today you and I both live in towns, Victoria and Austin, that have no professional sports teams.
Yeah, there is not one here.
No major sports teams. And so
Austin is a more likely candidate, though, for a major sports team.
Austin is
what's the population of Austin? Like,
it is metro area is like 2 million.
Yeah.
It's the 11th largest city in America, actually.
Wow, that's so weird that you don't have one.
Well, we kind of do with the college football, right?
Okay.
But I was going to quote something that I think I've quoted before, which is one of my favorite lines from John Hodgman's book, The Area of My Expertise. And if you haven't read it, he purports to create this book of complete world knowledge.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And at the beginning, he says, you know, you'll note that there are only 2 references to sports in the book,
right?
And they're both equally dismissive. And he says, if you would like more information about sports, I would direct you to every other aspect of our culture.
Right. So, I remember you saying this on like a really early episode. Yeah, that's so good.
I could probably quote it from memory every day.
Yeah, that and the shot glass with a dull crayon.
I'm like, if you feel like you're coming to me for sports information, I will kindly redirect you to every other aspect of our culture. I'm like, don't come to me for the football tweets or
yeah, that's good. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a major like huge Renaissance man sports kind of guy. Like I like the Vancouver Canucks for NHL hockey, and I'd like keep an eye on the NHL, and then ATP tennis, which is totally thanks to Wallace, and Infinite Jest and the Roger Federer piece. Those two, after I read both of those, I was like, I'm going to start playing tennis. And shortly after I started watching tennis, and now I'm pretty hooked. So that's been for the last 8 years. I've been pretty into professional tennis.
Well, I was a big baseball guy for a long time, and I still follow baseball, but mostly just to keep up with my fantasy leagues.
Oh, yeah, you're in some of those. Cool.
And I was in one fantasy baseball league for like 10 years. And I really I've been in the same one here in Austin for 5 or 6, 7 years. And,
cool.
And I really like it just because of the sense of community.
Totally.
Which forces me then to kind of keep up with the sport. I was also kind of into English Premier League soccer for a long time. So I could talk about my favorite team. I'm a supporter of Everton, so I get the Everton app, and I get some news about Everton, but I'm like the level of Everton fandom, I'm probably near the very bottom of people who haven't heard. It's
because they're pretty nutty about it, right?
Oh yeah, I mean it's
in the UK.
That's like saying that it's like
public hysteria.
The Pope is kind of into religion.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, there's like a level of people like who haven't heard of sports, and then people who haven't heard of soccer, people who haven't heard of Everton, and then like I'm like slightly above that. And then there's people with like facial tattoos.
Sure, yeah, of the team.
Right.
Yeah.
So we got to get into the list, man. I'm just like I could go on and on. So you're not going to hear any. You're not going to hear any sports books. I have no recommendations on that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I was about to mention before we got onto the sports topic of a cool announcement that we just got to make this week, actually. And most of the legwork for this happened in 2016, and it was pretty much ready to rock. And then we, put it out on
January
the 1st or the 2nd. That there now exists, with the president being yourself of this organization, the International David Foster Wallace Literary Society. Boom.
It's true. Boom. You can go check out the website, dfwsociety.org.
Yep.
And this is something that's been in the works for a long time. And it's something that I have dreamed about for a long time. And the time of it has never really been right. It's been difficult to sort of visualize what that should look like, but I think now we have the right team and the right people in place to make it happen. Yeah. And we have had just a tremendous response.
We have. And it's been wild.
I've been very happy with the response, and it's been very confirming to me that this was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So we're starting a journal that goes with that, and we're going to do the journal right. It's going to be independently run, but it's going to be peer-reviewed and double-blind reviews, and it's going to be open access, and it's going to be professionally printed and designed. It's going to be very nice piece of scholarship that we're going to do as really our main product, but we have a lot of other pieces of it planned. Yeah.
So fun surprises.
I mean, this community sort of already existed. We've had 3 different conferences just in Illinois, and then there's been many other conferences.
Lots others,
Yeah, in New York and Liverpool and Paris. One coming up in Australia.
Yeah.
So
to go to that, hey. What a dream!
Cross my fingers. I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine September right now, but it's possible. It's very possible.
Yeah, it's a bit of a trek for us, but those guys are committed to coming up here. That's for sure.
Well, and
I'm always so impressed by the Australian Wallace community.
They've all been to the U.S. Yeah. So like anyone who I know in the Wallace community, almost. They've all been to the U.S., so I got to hand it to them.
Oh yeah. Big ups.
But I think that's why also I wanted to make sure that word international was in there, and Definitely. That already we've had people from 9 or 10 different countries join, and we have people in leadership positions from Ireland, from Canada, from the US, from the UK, Australia, members from all over the world. So I want that piece of it. I want everyone to feel welcome.
Yeah,
and included
definitely.
in it.
Totally.
So you'll hear a lot more about the DFW Society in general, but probably just because you and I are so involved in it. I think there's going to be a lot of overlap between this podcast and the Literary Society. And
for sure.
The last thing I'll say about it is that people who are not familiar with literary societies might think this is not... like it's too soon for Wallace, and
right, like he's not canon yet or something.
And my response to that, I guess, but I mean, if you look at all the other literary societies that exist out there, I think it fits very much in line and makes sense. Partly because he has a literary archive at the Ransom Center.
Yeah,
he's had panels about him at ALA, at MLA
just recently this week. So I mean, multiple pieces of the puzzle are already there, and that's usually what happens with literary societies for single authors. And I'm a member of a couple of other ones, and so I'm familiar. I just joined the Don DeLillo Society the day after this one came out, because I was like, I wonder if there's a DeLillo Society, and searched it, and yep, there is, and then I joined it.
And I encourage other people to do that. Like, I'm a big Vladimir Nabokov fan, and so there's a big international Nabokov society. There's a John...
Is there a Bolaño Society?
Not in the U.S. I mean,
not yet.
I don't think there is, at least not in English language. But hey, maybe we'll start that too. Who knows?
There you go. But as if you don't have enough on your plate,
right? But there is one for John Updike. So I was a big Updike reader, writer, and
totally
did some research on some of his papers. And so Updike, died after Wallace, and his society runs pretty smoothly, and they've just recently purchased like John Updike's childhood home, so they are like doing stuff like that, like making a museum and stuff.
Yeah, crazy. That's cool. So yeah, you can go check out the website, which was put together by our friend Rob Short, who's been a guest on the show several times. It's pretty slick. Nice job, Rob. And there's pictures of all the people who are sort of on the steering committee, I guess you could say.
No, it's the board of directors. That's the other thing I'll say is that we're all volunteers, but we are setting it up to be a nonprofit organization. So we have a board of directors for the nonprofit, and the people who are on there there's some overlap, but separate from the journal, has its own editorial board.
Yes, right, yeah. And a lot of these people are familiar faces from the show. Probably, looking at them, I think 2 people we haven't had on the show. So look out for them in the future, hopefully.
Well, and we, like I say, even if you don't have a leadership position right now, you can submit to the journal. You can do something to be involved, become a member, become a patron.
Totally.
And, we're just in the early stages of this. We just launched it a week ago. And we've got a lot more plans, and to build out the community is sort of our goal for 2017.
Definitely. So, okay. But 2016, some cool books came out, or you read some cool books, and I read some cool books. What are some of your highlights, Matt? Did you do a count of how many books you read this year? I think last year it was like 70 something, if I don't.
Yeah, where to begin?
If I'm not mistaken.
I didn't keep a tally this year, but I mean it was at least 40 to 50.
Nice.
And where to begin? And so I'm going to start out with, I've mentioned on the show before, one of my literary heroes is Maggie Nelson. Yeah. And her book, The Argonauts, I think it came out in 2015, but
but you read it this year?
I read it in 2016.
Nice.
And it was a huge year for her too, in that she won the MacArthur Genius Grant.
Oh yeah,
cool. Which Wallace also won. So she got a lot of attention this year. And the other big event for me every year is the Texas Book Festival. And so I was on a panel this year with Angela Flournoy, who was a finalist for the National Book Award 2015. And her book, The Turner House, just came out in paperback, and I really enjoyed that. Nice. And also on that panel was Chigozie Obioma, who was a finalist for the Booker Prize. Oh, yeah. And his book, The Fisherman, I would recommend. It's set in Africa, and it's about these young boys. Also on that panel was a guy named Derek Palacio from... his book is called The Mortifications, and it's kind of about Cuban immigrants. And I would recommend all of those books. So I want to start with that. Cool. Well, and the other thing I'll say is I have a lot of books to recommend that are not necessarily for, like, if you like Infinite Jest, you will like this. Like, I have a lot of stuff that is just not
wildly dissimilar.
Yeah, it's totally dissimilar. And I mean, Maggie Nelson fits into that category. I think she's smart, but I don't think she has anything else in common with anyone else I read.
Right. Yeah.
So the other one, so at the Texas Book Festival, I also met a ton of other writers I respect, and I was super happy to meet. One is Chloe Caldwell, and she had, her first book was called Legs Get Led Astray. She had a book called Women. Her new book is called I'll Tell You in Person, and it's a book of essays. It's super confessional, and it's just really compelling reading. And I really like her style. There's a essay in there that's kind of a veiled story about Lena Dunham. But it's very easy to tell it's about Lena Dunham. She never says Lena Dunham, but
well, the cat's out of the bag now. You heard it here.
Cat's out of the bag, and that's published by Emily Books. And I've been a big supporter of Emily Books since they started their ebook store, and I bought books from them, subscribed, and have just really liked their transition now into print with their first book
cool.
was Chloe Caldwell. I haven't read their second book, which was Jade Sharma's Problems, so that's on my 2017 list.
Did you see today that Lena Dunham and Mary Carr have an interview coming out soon?
No, I did not see that.
Yeah.
We'll have to link to that.
They look like they're pals. They're like eating Oreos and hugging in the picture.
Interesting. Well, Lena Dunham is also pals with my older brother John in some way. Like John met her very earlier in her career. It's kind of a long story, but
yeah. Well, I really like the show Girls, and I'll talk about that a bit later.
I mean, any show that has like the Iowa Writers Workshop is like a major plot point.
Yeah. It's pretty literary.
It's pretty interesting. No, it's a great show.
Yeah.
Another one of my favorite books this year was, I think it has a January pub date, but I read it months ago, and it's called Always Happy Hour by Mary Miller. Oh, yeah. And it's a collection of short stories, and I highly, highly recommend it.
Oh, cool.
And some of the stories are set in Austin, like she used to live in Austin. Her first book I really liked, also called The Last Days of California, which is about a road trip. And it's kind of got some just kind of desperate characters in it that I really found just super compelling, and I really liked that book.
Did you say desperate or disparate?
I was going to say
desperate. Yeah, cool.
Not disparate, desperate.
Yeah. Nice.
Maybe they are disparate, but I think there's a lot of similarities between some of the stories, but in a way that is good.
Yeah.
It is good. Sometimes you read a book of short stories and you want more like the one you just finished, and now you're reading something about like kind of like a mystery, and you're like, what?
Yeah. And then also at the Texas Book Festival, you got to talk to Don DeLillo a little bit.
I got to meet Don DeLillo. Briefly.
That's pretty good. So that's your second encounter with him now?
Second time I've got to meet Don DeLillo, but I just totally clam up in his presence, and
that seems about right. I'm sure I would too.
But I who else I did meet there, who I did not clam up around, is a trio of Latin American writers who was huge deal for me.
Pray tell.
One is Andre Newman, and he has a new book called How to Travel Without Seeing, and it's a book of essays about his travels through Latin America, and it's a really unique sort of travel guide and diary. And he is famous in Latin America for being kind of praised by Bolaño. So I got to talk Bolaño with him for a while, which was amazing. And he was there with Carlos Fonseca, who has a new book called Colonel Lagrimas, and I would recommend that book highly. Someone recommended it to me as having some kind of Wallace influence, and at first I couldn't see it. Right, it starts out about this aging general or colonel who is penning his memoirs very carefully, and it reminded me more of Nabokov than Wallace. But then later on you start seeing the structure of the thing, and I don't want to spoil it, but I would say it's a fantastic book by Carlos Fonseca. And the other one who is there is a guy named Eduardo Rabasa, and he has a new book called Zero Sum Game.
Oh, yeah?
And he is the founder of a publishing company in Mexico called Sexto Piso. And he's really famous for that, but this is his first book, so I was super excited to read it.
Oh, cool.
And I highly recommend that. It's kind of a alternate reality dystopian.
I like those.
And it's like set in this housing complex outside of a massive unnamed city, probably Mexico City. And it's kind of about politics, but all through like an allegory. It's really interesting book.
Awesome.
And I'm going to say one other like Latin American book I read this year that I really liked, and then I'm going to take a breath and let you talk. I read a book called Among Strange Victims by Daniel Saldana Paris, and the first part of it is about a guy just kind of wandering around Mexico City. And if you know me, I love a novel where it's like it's just a guy kind of wandering around.
Oh my gosh, City of Glass by Paul Auster.
That's one. I mean,
that is probably my favorite one I can think of that hits that.
Ben Lerner, Leaving the Atocha Station. I mean, I have a bunch of these.
Oh, I just bought a Ben Lerner book the other day.
1004.
I haven't read it yet. Yeah, 1004. I've heard good things about
1004 is good, and it has some of that stuff in it where he's just wandering around.
The flaneur kind of motif.
Yeah, flaneur. And there's some of that novel where he is just kind of hanging out in Marfa, Texas. And I think that might be like the Great Marfa novel.
Oh yeah.
Even though only part of it is set in Marfa. But
are there many Martha novels?
Marfa, Texas. You don't know Marfa, Texas?
Yeah.
All right.
Not too well, no.
All right, so go research Marfa, Texas. This is the home of Donald Judd, and we'll talk more about Marfa, but so Wallace was there in 2000, and the Lannan Foundation has a fellowship you can win where you go there and just live in this house and write in the Trans-Pecos area. And Wallace was there in 2000 at the same time as a writer named Sean Willents. But anyways, cool. Ben Lerner got that same foundation grant and lived in the house and wrote part of 1004 there.
Oh, cool. Right on.
So anyways, you should talk about music or movies or something else for a minute.
Yeah, okay. Well, I got a few books too. I guess we could check them off the list.
Do it.
One by one. I finished a book actually just today by Mexican writer Yuri Herrera, Signs Preceding the End of the World.
Yeah, I love that book. I have it.
Yeah, it was great. I really enjoyed it. It's really short. It's like 117 pages. Really quick read. I read it in a few days, but the prose is really lovely and
his style is pretty dramatic, right? Like
yeah, it is. It reminded me a fair bit of like Cormac McCarthy in some ways, where it's kind of sparse.
Yes.
But it has kind of a vernacular sort of vibe to it.
Yes.
That was quite nice. I like that. One of my thesis supervisors teaches that in his first year readings and narrative class, and a friend of mine who's just going back to school now just read it, and I like proofread one of his papers for him, but I hadn't read the book yet, so it intrigued me. And Rachel also read that book earlier this year and said it was great, so that was a good one I read in the last year since our last best of the year episodes. Probably my favorite book this year that I read, which I just finished recently, was 0K by Don DeLillo.
Don DeLillo, yeah.
Yeah, I think it is probably his strongest book, I would say, in quite a while. So if I were to rank my favorite Don DeLillo books, they would go White Noise, Underworld, Libra, Mao 2, and then I might say 0K would be the next one. So I don't know. What were your thoughts on 0K? You read that this year?
I really liked 0K. I thought it was an interesting concept, the premise of it, about cryonics, and it's sort of like
cryogenic freezing.
Yeah, and it's like once that technology becomes, even people think it's feasible, would you be willing to basically murder someone to save their life long term? Like, it's an interesting philosophical
like voluntarily end your life now. Yeah, it's quite a really, it's like got a lot of esoteric philosophy in it. Like, the two like Scandinavian brothers who are characters who just like theorize about these kinds of futures, and no one does that kind of writing better than Don DeLillo, right? So I found there were some really great passages in that book.
Yeah, and you can tell he enjoyed writing it, which I like books like that. But I liked his book, The Angel Esmeralda, too, which is a book of short stories.
Yeah, the short stories. Yeah, that was fantastic, too.
There's some short stories in there, I think, that are some of his best. So
Absolutely. I just wrapped Here I Am by Jonathan Safran Foer fairly recently as well. Did you get a chance to read that this year?
Haven't touched it.
Are you a Foer guy?
No, not really.
It's pretty big. It's like almost 600 pages.
Yeah, man. I've tried to read a few of his books, and I just it's just not for me, man.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of the people from the Wallace community say that, and I think I read Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close in 2006. So before I read Infinite Jest, and I really liked it at the time, and Everything's Illuminated as well. I think now, maybe a decade later, I'm probably a little less inclined to be super hyped on him. I thought this book was it's about a family, like a Jewish family living in DC, and then there's some events that are kind of peripheral to the main story of the book, but they there's some stuff that happens in Israel relating to like a cataclysmic event of some kind. I won't spoil exactly what, but I found like the geopolitical theorizing the most interesting part of the book. And it was less interesting for me to read about like the intricacies of this family's daily life together and the relational stuff going on. And because we've lived in Tel Aviv a couple years ago for 6 months, I found like a lot of the place location references were places I've been to, and so I could really like walk through those parts of the book in a personal way. I don't know if I'd like wildly recommend it. But it's definitely more mature than the other 2 books by him that I mentioned. Like it's a lot grittier, it's more adult. But I mean, he does capture some nice moments for sure. So
well, that reminds me that I did read a Dave Eggers book this year, the new one, Heroes of the Frontier. Which I was excited to get because I like the idea of it about going to Alaska. And I just got really bored with it. Like, I was like, I felt like a slog just because like I didn't give a crap. And I felt like I wasn't going anywhere. And so I wouldn't recommend it per se, but like I liked Eggers' other recent stuff like The Circle and Hologram for the King. I liked those books. Right. But the Heroes of the Frontier, man, like I just...
Not your scene.
It was good, but I was just bored. After a while, I was like, all right, man, you got to do something. Like, I like movies, I like books where you're just wandering around, but like even I eventually get tired of it. Like if
wandering with a purpose is necessary at some point.
Well, if I don't care about the people or I don't trust the author or something, like it's really hard to manufacture something beyond that. Like you have to do something with it. But
yeah, for sure. Speaking of like cryogenic freezing as a theme or like consciousness archiving as a theme, I read another book this year by Chris Adrian, who's one of my favorite writers.
Oh, right.
Yeah, him and Eli Horowitz co-wrote a really small book. It's kind of like a novella. It's called The New World, and actually is very similar to Zero K in terms of like setting and theme and things like that. So pretty cool as well. And then I just reread Infinite Jest for my thesis for Infinite Winter. I almost finished rereading The Pale King, which I mentioned last episode, but then forgot it in my hotel room. Yeah,
too bad.
And this is like a funny aside, but the company that publishes Netrunner, which I've talked about on the show, this game that I'm obsessed with,
right?
They published 3 novellas this year, all about like a singular character from the game universe. It's called the Android universe, and it's not specific just to Netrunner. There's other like board games and things set in this universe, but a video game cultural critic named Lee Alexander wrote one of these books called Monitor, and I really liked that book this year too.
Oh, interesting.
It's about like one of the corporations is like a surveillance entertainment giant, and so like it's in some ways there's a lot of parallels to like Big Brother. So it's about this one character like trying to navigate this like hyper saturated surveillance media state, and like trying to give something of an FU to this corporation called NBN. So again, dystopia. It's good stuff.
And you did go to Worlds, right? You want to mention that?
I went to Minnesota, that's where I forgot The Pale King. So hopefully some lucky hotel staffer ended up with it, and it's got your Pale King bookmark in it too. So it's real thematic.
I'll send you another one.
I actually I have some friends in Kelowna, which is where I used to live, who have a board game podcast, and they've had me on twice, and I went on recently to talk about my experience going to Minnesota to play at Worlds. So we can link to that in the show. I think I tweeted it a couple weeks ago from our Concavity Twitter. It's called Boards Alive, and I just talk about being a huge nerd, essentially, going to this thing. It was fun. Yeah, that was definitely a year highlight for sure.
We'll send that link out from our Twitter account as well.
Sure. If that's something that interests you.
But you, going back to what you're saying about Chris Adrian being one of your favorite authors, that reminds me that 2 of my favorite authors had new books in 2016.
Oh, yeah.
And that was Nicholson Baker, who had a book called Substitute, which is a nonfiction book about him being a substitute teacher. for a year in Maine. And I read the whole thing. It's like 800 pages, and it's it's basically just like transcripts of his day, of like what he did every day. And if you actually break it down and see what goes on in a classroom every day, you realize how kind of ad hoc instruction can be, and how little learning can get done in a day. And it's really good, just sort of documentary of like the snapshot of this time and day in education. But the other cool thing that happened with that is that Nichols and Baker joined Twitter this year.
Oh yeah, and I remember you being super hyped about that.
I mean, yeah, it's really him, and like I tweeted at him a few times and he replied, and I was like, you know, what a time to be alive, where you can just tweet at your favorite author and like know they're going to read it and respond. That was cool.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Speaking of that, I tweeted at Bill Gates a couple times recently from our account, because he published a list of his top 5 favorite books of the year, and String Theory by Wallace was on there, and there's a whole thing on his blog about David Foster Wallace and string theory. So if we can somehow get Bill Gates on the show, that would be pretty sweet.
Yeah. He probably has a robot reading his tweets or something.
I'm sure. Yeah. We'll have to avoid telling him that we're like Apple product users.
I mean, I think it's very possible that Gates could become more involved in the Wallace world in some way, but I also think it's very likely that he will have a new favorite thing 5 minutes from now. So my other favorite writer who had a new book out was Karl Ove Knausgaard.
Oh yes,
and
you love this man.
Volume 5 came out in April, and Volume 6.
Volume 6 is out too, right?
Well, it's going to come out in April of 2017.
Oh, okay.
So Volume 4 came out in paperback, and then Volume 5 comes out in paperback this year. And I just absolutely love these books on a very personal level.
I got to get on this.
There's a kind of a emerging consensus that book 2 is the best, but I really like all of them, and I wouldn't skip one of them. So I can't let a year go by, at least after 2017, of saying Knausgaard's name, because it's huge.
Yeah, very cool.
All right, what else did you have on your list, Dave?
That's about it for books. Like I said, most of it was scholarship, and I mean, the cool thing about being done your master's but still in the Wallace community is there's so many monographs coming out now. Claire Hayes Brady, David Herring, Lucas Thompson soon, and many others.
Jeff Severs.
Jeff Severs, that's going to be great. That I still feel plugged into the academic side of things. So it almost still feels like I'm still in my master's because of that. So that's pretty nice. I like that. But I don't have the excruciating pressure of finishing my thesis by a certain date. So it's relief.
Cool. Well, let's get into the music or movies. What else do you got, man?
Yeah. Okay. Music. Every year since I think 2007, I make a list of my favorite, top 10, top 20 albums of the year, and I put it on Facebook. And the fact that now Twitter is something that I use more because of the show means that we get to we'll tweet out, or we'll add to the show notes the Great Concavity's favorite songs of the year, which is sort of you and I sort of what's the word? Collaborated. I have together on a little bit.
One thing, and it's it's Dave's list otherwise. But.
All right, cool. But so you get a bonus playlist with this episode. We did this last year too, I think. But I guess in no particular ish order, because it's in some ways it's really hard to rank.
Yeah.
The spot 6 and 7 particularly are pretty challenging, but I would say probably my favorite album this year was by a band called Whitney. The album's called Light Upon the Lake, and they were previously a band called Smith Westerns, and that band broke up a couple years ago, and then they formed this new band this year. And Pitchfork always publishes their top 50 albums of the year, and this album was on there, and they were a big hit with the reader poll that Pitchfork does. So a lot of people said that Whitney was like their favorite new band of the year and that kind of thing. So I kind of describe them as like, they sound a lot like the Velvet Underground in some ways, like a lot of similar kind of like guitar tones and guitar riffs. So that was like my first immediate sort of impression of them was that kind of Velvet Underground kind of vibe.
Okay.
Which is good. A band called Big Thief came out this year, a brand new band with an album called Masterpiece, which is, I mean, pretty hilarious title on some levels. It could be seen as audacious to call your first album Masterpiece, but I think it is a pretty strong album. Maybe not quite a masterpiece, but it's pretty solid. They're sort of a straight up rock band, I would say, with a female vocalist. Really nice stuff. You've probably heard of Bon Iver, Matt.
Yes, I like
how
him.
How can you not?
I like
at this point. Yeah,
I'm a fan.
I really like. Yeah, I like that album a lot this year. 22 a Million. It's got like the weirdest song titles of all time. It's just like weird symbols, and it's almost like following after Prince or something in that way, perhaps. A lot of like auto-tune kind of stuff going on with that. Just weird. A lot of, I was saying to Rachel today, like a lot of like Alvin and the Chipmunks kind of vocal effects, which is maybe not like a flattering way to put it, but that's what it reminds me of. But it works, man. It works. Hamilton Leithauser, who is from the band The Walkmen, came out with a collaborative album this year with one of the guys from Vampire Weekend, and the album's called I Had a Dream That You Were Mine, and that's a nice album. And you and I have texted about some of the songs on that are strong.
Yeah, I like it.
Radiohead, yeah, it's nice. Radiohead came out with an album this year. They're, I would have to say, my favorite band of all time. Someone, posed that question. Yeah. I've been a big fan for a long time. Seen them live a few times, and their album this year, Moonshaped Pool, was pretty good. Wasn't Kid A, or it wasn't OK Computer, but it was still pretty solid. And have you spent any time with that, Matt?
A little bit. I mean, my attitude towards Radiohead is like, I like them, and I feel like it's like my vegetables. Like, people are like, you should really eat this, man. It's good for you. Like, you should really listen to this. And so, I mean, if I have a choice between 10 records and I know 9 of them are crap and one is Radiohead, I'm like, oh man, this Radiohead looks great. I mean, I'm just not at like I don't appreciate them, I guess, as much as they should be or something.
Right,
but
you're a soft fan.
I'm a soft fan. I'm like,
yeah, that's cool.
I'm with that like 99% of music in general.
Yeah.
So
Paul Thomas Anderson directed one of their music videos from this album, from a song called Daydreaming. Pretty nice video. Did you see it around? Tom York is like walking through all these different doors into different rooms, but they're all totally unrelated.
I just wasn't blown away with it, man, and I wasn't that blown away with Inherent Vice either. He didn't Pynchon's Inherent Vice.
I think I read Inherent Vice in the last year as well, and the book didn't really grab me, and the film I was really excited for because I love P.T. Anderson, but same kind of experience as the book. I was like, it felt a bit flat overall.
It's kind of boring, man, and it's like, I don't know. My love for P.T. Anderson is waning a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I did hear that he's working on a film with Daniel Day-Lewis right now, so maybe that could resurrect your interest. Because I mean, There Will Be Blood is right? Yeah. I think There Will Be Blood is one of my favorite movies ever. So if they can recreate some of that magic, that'd be a good thing.
Yeah.
Angel Olsen came out with an album called My Woman, solid rock album. It's got kind of like a old-timey country feel in terms of her vocals. Cool stuff. Parquet Courts, of course. We got to talk to Andrew Savage last episode. Their album Human Performance is Knockout from this year. And man, that was really fun hanging out, talking with him. That was good. We've had a lot of really positive feedback from you listeners about that one, so that was cool. He mentioned to us that one of his favorite albums this year was by Kate LeBon.
Yes.
And I'd never heard of Kate LeBon, so I looked her up, and I really like the album that he recommended, Crab Day, from this year. That's on my top 10 list. It snuck in sort of right at the last minute. And then also she has an album from 2013 called Mug Museum, and it is my friend the other day described it as flawless, and I tend to agree. It's really strong. Crab Day is a little bit like kooky, I would say. Like it's a bit wacky, a bit weird. Mug Museum is a bit more standard, sort of straightforward listening experience, and just some of the songs on there are just super rad. She's playing in Vancouver on January 16th, and I think I might be in that neighborhood for that. So Kate LeBon is going to be on my list to see. Two more. Car Seat Headrest is a band that also put out an album last year that was also in my top 10, and Josh Royland put me onto this band. So Josh, thanks for that. Josh has been on the show before, and their album this year was called Teens of Denial. Last year it was called Teens of Style. So we have some kind of fascination with teenagers. I'm not sure what that's about, but it's just a pretty solid rock album. And then there's a band from Philadelphia called Sheer Mag, and they're like a garage rock kind of band, kind of punk. They put out a 4-song EP this year called 3. Last year they put out a 4-song EP called 2, and the previous year they put out a 4-song EP called, can you guess it, Matt?
Santa Maria.
So they got 1, 2, and 3, and the third EP was awesome this year. But it's hard to put an EP, like a 4-song EP, on your top 10 list because there's a lot of other like full albums. But this band is just amazing, and a magical thing happened in December where they put out a 12-inch LP that has all 3 of the EPs on it.
Oh, cool.
So you got 1, 2, and 3 all back to back. And my friend and I had just been like dreaming about how rad it would be if they did that a few months ago. Like, please let them do that. And they did. And so that was like right in time for Christmas. So Sheer Mag, check them out. They're not on Apple Music though. So it's like, you got to listen to them on their Bandcamp, which I did for 7 months, just listening off their Bandcamp. But now they produced a record. So that's good stuff.
Wow, that's cool.
So there's the top 10 for music, and then a few other good albums too, but we'll share that playlist with you guys, and you can check out what we dug. Oh, I should also mention 2 more things. Music. So sometimes you discover music that you didn't know existed, and sometimes it's from a long time ago, and you're like, how did I not know this was a thing?
Yeah. So
have you ever heard the song by Harry Nilsson, Many Rivers to Cross?
No.
Harry Nilsson was like a singer from the 60s and 70s, and this particular song is from an album called Pussycats, which was produced by John Lennon, and it's the first track on the album. And I heard it on a TV show called Rectify, and I just have listened to it so many times in like the last 6 weeks. It is phenomenal, so check out that track. It's on YouTube or wherever. And also I'll say, if my favorite album of the year, but it wasn't from this year, is by a band called Marine Dreams. They're a Canadian band from Toronto. Came out in 2011, and it's self-titled, and there's also a song called Marine Dreams on it, so they just really milk that theme.
Wow.
It's fantastic. Check that out as well.
I usually do go back and look up the stuff that you recommend, and I usually do like most of it.
Most of it.
So I mean, like Kate LeBon, you mentioned her. I mean, after Andrew Savage mentioned her.
Yeah.
And I went and looked her up on YouTube, and I was watching some of her videos, and I was like, yeah, this actually is kind of up my alley. So
yeah.
This kind of stuff is good for me because I'll go back to this podcast later and actually look some of this stuff up, and I'll put it in the show notes too, so people can read it.
Yeah, totally. Cool. I'll do that with your book recommendations as well.
I have more books too, by the way. I'm just letting you go through the movies or whatever. Like,
oh yeah, nice.
I only went to the movies like twice in 2016, and I think it was both children's movies that I took my kids to.
Yeah. I think movies for me, there weren't a lot of films this year that I was like really, really psyched on. And stuff in the theaters, like not a lot of stuff really grabbed me this year. I will say though, I really like The Arrival, which is like a movie about So the premise is like in the first 5 minutes you learn that like alien spaceships have come down, and there's this linguist played by Amy Adams who's kind of like, is the US government is like, hey, we want you to like interface with these aliens and try and create some kind of like universal way to communicate with them. So I found that movie pretty compelling.
Yeah, I was just at the Linguist Society of America conference.
Right, yeah.
And no, I was not there, but it was in Austin, and our buddy Chris Ayers from a previous episode was there.
Yeah.
And they were going to see Arrival again in Austin just a couple days ago. I bet the linguists
just eat that film up. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I'm pretty sure they already have multiple papers written about it. And,
yeah, it was pretty cool. I liked it.
But I saw Zootopia.
Oh, yeah.
Which is an animated feature.
Right. I haven't seen that.
No, I don't want to talk about Zootopia, dude.
All right, cool. Did you see The Lobster this year? I'd say that's another film that was pretty strong. I did not. And really all I'll say about movies before I get back to books for a couple minutes is that I really like Werner Herzog movies. Yeah.
And he
absolutely
had a new one come out on Netflix. It's about volcanoes.
Oh, yeah. I haven't seen that yet.
It's really good, and I really like it. I also found out that he kind of does a cameo in The Penguins of Madagascar.
Oh, yeah.
So if you've never seen the Penguins of Madagascar animated feature, I
have not.
I recommend it. Like, I'm sort of a connoisseur of every known animated film because
children's movie.
I have 2 small kids and I've seen like everything at the library. And Penguins of Madagascar, I would actually watch again. It is good.
Oh, rad.
So
that's good.
It has Werner Herzog in it, for God's sakes.
That's amazing. He does one of the voices of a penguin or something?
No, he does. He's like a documentary filmmaker in it.
Oh, okay. That's awesome.
But also, what's funny is our friend Robin O'Neill recently on her podcast, she had this mention of one of my all-time favorite movies, which is American Movie.
American Movie? Oh, yeah.
And I could rewatch that movie over and over, and it's like comfort food to me. Like I'll go and watch Werner Herzog. By the way, my favorite Herzog movie is Happy People. So if you have not seen Happy People, it's on Netflix. Go watch it. And I watch that movie all the time. But American Movie is another one that I just return to over and over. So I was so happy to see Robin like quote from it.
Yeah, she's like way into that. It's her favorite movie of all time, I think she said.
Yeah, I love it as well.
I've never seen it, but after I listened to that, it was like a few nights ago, I went on YouTube and I like watched as much stuff about it as I could, and yeah, it looks pretty great. I really want to see it now.
I mean, this guy Mark Borchardt, I find, is total inspiration to me.
Yeah,
and
he seems amazing.
He's just so dedicated to his vision, his like artistic vision, and I love stuff like that. Love it.
Yeah, that's cool. One movie that I was really excited for this year was the David Brent Life on the Road movie. Do you remember the BBC Office?
Yeah, and I did not see this, but I know of it.
Yeah, I'm a huge Office fan, and I was really pumped to see this movie. And I watched it recently, and it's okay, like just okay, I would say. Like almost all the funniest parts are either in the trailer, or they actually released a 20-song studio album of all the songs that David Brent performs in the movie and more. And so like if you listen to that album before you watch the movie and then you see them in the movie, they're not quite as funny because you know what's coming. So I think if you watch the movie and then listen to the soundtrack after, if you were so inclined, that would be a better choice for enjoying the film.
I'm a big fan of the BBC Office, so.
Yeah, it's good. It's real good. Other than that, like, not a lot of stuff really grabbed me this year film wise, but The Lobster with Colin Farrell is pretty kooky, and I really enjoyed that. It's very like misanthropic in a lot of ways, but it's pretty compelling.
Yeah, it's on Netflix. I'll probably get to it eventually.
It's on Netflix. Yeah, you might like it.
Or Amazon.
It's got some. I'd say it's got some symmetry with Herzog in terms of the kind of vibe that it has.
All right. Well, even if it doesn't, if you just say that, it'll compel me to do it.
Okay. Cool.
So I have a couple of other books if we have time.
Yeah.
Do you have a few minutes?
Jump back.
A couple minutes?
Absolutely.
There was a couple of biographies that I read this year I wanted to mention. One is a biography of Harry Crews called Blood, Bone, and Marrow. It's by Ted Geltner.
That's a cool title.
And it's an absolutely fantastic book if you have any interest in Harry Crews at all. I love Harry Crews, and this book will make you want to go reread or pick up or try to find all of Harry Crews's books. And Harry Crews wrote his own autobiography called A Childhood Biography of a Place that is just devastating. I mean, just unbelievably bleak and rough about like being a poor child of a sharecropper in Georgia, Bacon County, Georgia. The other biography I want to mention is of Octavia Butler, who's a science fiction writer. She's kind of categorized as a science fiction writer, but I think she's more interesting than that. And the book is by Jerry Canavan. And if you have any interest in Octavia Butler or you've read her stuff, it's just a really fantastic literary biography of a writer who really struggled. And she came up from nothing and, forced herself to become a successful author and did it. And I think, she died unexpectedly of a fall, and she didn't leave her estate in proper order, so there's some like similarities with Wallace, and that she also didn't publish a ton. I think she only published 10 books in her lifetime, but she's got a fantastic biography now by Jerry Canavan. I want to mention one other book I read I really liked called Nine Island by Jane Allison, which is also just kind of like a person wandering around, but it's set in Miami Beach, and it's kind of her just wandering around this giant high-rise apartment in Miami Beach. And I really liked that book a lot. Another book that I would be remiss without mentioning is
I love that phrase.
Bottom's Dream.
Oh, yeah. So this is like the huge double hardcover book.
It's the size of a suitcase.
Yeah.
I mean, you could put it on wheels and pull it around the house. And I when I saw this book, I was like, I got to get it. I was like, I love a book that's about the size of a coffee table.
Sure.
And here's the other thing is, so for one, the book is physically maybe the largest book I own. I like building... Yeah, like building stories, so I put it next to Infinite Jest, and you could put like 3 or 4 Infinite Jests in this thing.
Right. It's like an atlas size kind of a book, right?
It's like Webster's Unabridged Dictionary size.
Yeah.
But the other, it's not just a book either. So when you open it up, you realize the text is written in a really bizarre format, and that it's got all kinds of call outs and shortcuts and weird text symbols, and like it's, if you've ever read Pynchon's Mason and Dixon, how this obsolete vernacular mixed with like poetry, mixed with like, it's really hard to parse in sometimes. It's like Finnegan's Wake in some places, but you can get into a groove with it. And one day I got into a groove and read about 3 or 4 pages, and it was like, that's a miracle. Like
3 or 4 is a miracle. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really slow going. Like I'm kind of a slow reader anyways, even though I read a lot. And this is gonna like take me my whole life to finish this book.
Wow, it's a project of great magnitude.
I would be remiss without mentioning The Bottom's Dream came out in 2016. It's just, and it's also translated, so it's like there's an original in German. Okay. Arno Schmidt. So the fact that it took like 30 years to translate this book.
Okay, wow, just to translate it.
Yeah.
That's crazy. How long did it take to write?
I mean, I have no idea. There's a New Yorker article about Bottom's Dream. You should go look that up, but I'll link to it or whatever. But it's a phenomenal book.
Is it like a Shakespeare reference to Bottom? Is it Midsummer Night's Dream?
Yes.
Yeah.
But it has nothing to do with that, right? I mean, it has to do with the idea of there's some like Bottom's Dream is this really carnal, like activity.
Fest.
Yeah. and it is kind of referencing that.
Right.
John Updike also had a book called Bottom Stream that was a children's book from Midsummer's Night Dream, which was kind of a sanitized version.
Oh yeah.
And it was also like a children's book. So
gotcha.
A couple of other things is I realized this summer I read a set of books that were all about like someone having kind of like a midlife crisis and like domestic struggles and but they're all really good books, so I want to mention them. They kind of go together as a set, I think, and one is Summer Long by Dean Bacopoulos. Have you heard of him? Dean Bacopoulos?
No. Maybe. That sounds semi-familiar.
His first book was called Don't Come Back from the Moon, but I really liked his new book called Summer Long, and I actually read part of it twice because I got it from the library first time, and then I got it. I didn't finish it, and so I got it later and started it over. But the other one is called The Sky Changes by Gilbert Sorrentino. And Sorrentino is a fantastic writer. I've read some of his stuff before. He died maybe a decade ago, and The Sky Changes is about a road trip of a couple who is getting divorced, and they're still driving cross country, and they've hired like a guy to drive them, and like it's like the wife is kind of maybe having an affair with this guy, but they're just like in this situation.
Sounds nuanced.
It's really good.
Cool.
The third one is called Raymond Carver Will Not Raise Our Children by Dave Newman.
That's a great title.
And I sort of serendipitously discovered this book on Amazon. Just the title, I was like instant order. I was like, I got to get this book. And then when I read it, I was like, man, this is legit. Like this dude can write. And
that's a nice surprise.
It's so well done. And, you know, he's a professor of creative writing. It's mostly set in Pittsburgh. It's in Pittsburgh. And it's really just like how blue collar and like working class, like most college professors are, especially if you're struggling to be a writer. And, you know, you can teach Raymond Carver, but that ain't going to raise the children. Like you still got to come home at night and like, it's not very glamorous, but it's, I really like that book. So Raymond Carver Will Not Raise Our Children, Dave Newman.
That sounds good.
2 thumbs up from me. The last thing, the last one on my list, Dave, that we have not mentioned yet. No, wait. Second to last. I got one other book.
Penultimate.
So I read one book also that came out about 40, 50 years ago that made a huge impression on me. It's called I Remember by Joe Brainerd. Have you heard of it?
I have heard of him. Not sure if I've heard of that particular book. So
this book is famous for every sentence in the book begins with the words I remember. So every page, and it sounds like a gimmick, right? Like you would get old after a couple pages, but it amazingly, it never gets old. And a lot of he started a trend of like teaching children to write poems by starting with just those 2 words. So you just say, I remember, and then something. Everyone remembers something. And it's a really fun literary exercise anyone can do. Cool. But I was going to read a couple of the I Remembers out of there. I was picking the book up today, and just at random, I opened this page. I was like, you know, this book, I want to reread it now. It says, I remember when both arms of your theater seat have elbows on them. I remember making designs in the dark with a fast-moving lit cigarette. I remember when all of a sudden someone you know very well becomes momentarily a stranger. And some of the book, you know, is literally about his past. Like, you know, he remembers Mary Jane, whatever, or he remembers, you know, what fall felt like, or he remembers, you know, this football player on the team. But it's a way for him to write a memory of a time and a place that is just unique. There's nothing else like it. Wow. And it had a blurb on it by Paul Auster, who you mentioned earlier. So I was
he has a novel coming out in 2017 as well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. New George Saunders this year too.
I'm very psyched for that.
The last book, so that was the penultimate. The last book is the 20th anniversary edition of Infinite Jest.
I was wondering if that was going to be it. Nice. Yes, that book's okay, I guess.
It's all right.
It's pretty good.
It has a new foreword and a new cover, about which much could be said.
Sure, and has been said.
Has been said. And I don't know if you saw just recently, Ryan Marnane posted a picture of a new edition of Infinite Jest that has the 20th anniversary introduction from Tom Bissell, but it has the old blue cover.
I have not seen this picture.
It's really,
how did I miss that?
It's
interesting.
It's a really bizarre, and I got to find that edition now because I'm a completist.
Wow, yeah, okay. I think I like the Dave Eggers intro a little more than Tom Bissell's. I mean, it's more, I think it resonated a bit more with me.
Well, and I read someone had some feedback that Dave Eggers' introduction would make you believe that you could read the book more. Like Tom Bissell's introduction is a little daunting.
Yeah. It's a kind of esoteric in some ways, right?
I mean, I didn't think so, but I'm not the audience for it, right? Because I've read the book multiple times, so I'm not the...
Sure.
The fresh
You're not the
reader.
guy they're trying to hook for the first time. Yeah, exactly.
But no, 2016 was the 20th anniversary of Infinite Jest. And, I was really hoping there would be some big celebrations and activities or something, events about that. And there was an event at the Ransom Center here in Austin. And I did go to it. And it was nice, but it was very short. It was some students got up and read from the book, and they did a great job. But there was an event, I would say not on the anniversary, but on the election day at Harvard.
Right, yeah.
Which
heard about this.
Looked just incredible. The number of high-profile readers they got in to come in there and read from the book.
Who did they have?
James Woods was one. James Wood. They had, I think, Jamaica Kincaid and...
cool.
What's her name? That was the editor of the New York Times. Jill Abramson.
Oh, yeah, nice.
So anyways, that looked like a fantastic event, but I really was hoping there would be something like a Jest Fest.
Jest Fest. Yeah, that's nice.
But then I realized it's really the Wallace Conference. That's what the DFW conference has become and will become. So.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. And I was quite pleasantly surprised this year at the conference to see how much of a range of papers were not about Infinite Jest at all. Like, a lot of people were branching out into Oblivion, into Brief Interviews, and The Pale King. So, I mean, Infinite Jest, yeah, you'll hear about it for sure, but things were definitely spreading out more thin, which is nice to see.
Yeah, and I think there's still a lot of uncovered territory left to go. I mean, it's going to take a while to cover all of that. So
yeah, for sure. That's true. Well, thank you for sharing your lists of books, Matt. Very extensive, and as usual, put my reading year to shame.
Well, and that's like I say, that's my main hobby in life. So I rely on you to give me the music recommendations and other people to give me film recommendations. So if you have some, please email us and tweet at us, do something.
Yeah, tell us what we missed. Did you get to see any TV shows this year, Matt? I would say that TV was great this year. Definitely better for me in terms of my taste than film was.
I kind of half-heartedly watched Shameless. My wife was watching Shameless a lot this year. I remember watching some of that.
Is that the William H. Macy one?
Yes.
Yeah, I watched a few episodes of that.
But I'm just like, it's really hard for me to commit to something. Like, I've never watched Game of Thrones.
Right, yeah.
I did like Mad Men. I liked Breaking Bad. Like, I'll watch some TV shows.
Sure,
but, it's just hard for me to, get into something, honestly.
Yeah, right. Well, there were some pretty strong new shows that came out this year that I would be remiss if we didn't mention them briefly. One that I just finished watching in the last couple of weeks is called The OA. I
started that. I watched the first couple of episodes and I liked it.
Yeah, it's pretty compelling, right?
Yeah, and I watched it because there was an interview with the creators saying they were influenced by Wallace.
Yeah, I have the quote right here. I was going to mention it. So, interesting footnote here. So the director of the show, Zal Batmanglij, he's the brother of Rostam Batmanglij, who did the album with Hamilton Leithauser that we were talking about.
No kidding.
So this brother team is like dynamic duo
the
of
OA.
pop culture. Yeah. So the quote is, so the title in that part of the interview said, "On the slow moving nature of the show." And he says, "I think we were very inspired by David Foster Wallace, who said you have to get the audience to work for something. I feel that a lot. That sometimes I don't want to watch a series that is making me surrender to it or is going to change the rules of engagement. Then other people watch it and have an experience." So he's talking about, people having an experience with this particular show. And I think it's not a flawless show, but I think that it is a really compelling storytelling method. And the first 3 episodes particularly, I had to watch the next one immediately, or else I thought I would die. So,
and the main actress, she's also like
Britt
the
Marling.
writer and producer, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Britt Marling, and she did a movie called Another Earth several years ago, which I thought was also pretty solid.
AE, was that AE? Another. Do you remember that cartoon? That was like a cartoon. I don't remember.
Oh no, I don't.
AE 2000 or whatever.
Yeah, they did another film together called The East some years ago that is about like environmental anarchism. It's like an anarchist group that did like environmental activism. I didn't actually see it, I don't think, or I saw a bit of it, but that's about it. So I thought that show was pretty compelling. Westworld is another HBO show that came out this year that you've probably seen around a little bit. Explores sort of a futuristic questions of artificial intelligence in a really weird setting, and I think it was actually a remake of a show from like the 1970s or something.
Yeah.
But essentially the premise is like there's this theme park that's set in like the Wild West, and you can pay a lot of money to go into it, and there's just like all these androids everywhere, and you can interact with them and like go on different quests, like searching for gold or like taking out bandits, or you can be really carnal. Like there's just a lot of options, and it's meant to sort of like remove the morality element because you're not actually committing these acts with human beings. They're just androids. But then like interesting things develop within that the idea of like the singularity or AI consciousness is something they start to explore. So a lot of cool overlap for Netrunner with me in that show. Lots of similar themes.
What is the due date of your baby again? April?
April.
It might cut into some of your TV time. Just warning you.
It might, yeah. That's for sure. It'll definitely cut into my Netrunner time. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm
so sad in advance.
Just enjoy it now.
Yeah. For sure. Another great show this year that Ryan Marnane put me onto is Horace and Pete, which is Louis C.K.'s show. Did you hear about this?
Everyone loves Louis C.K., and I told you I'm just like contrarian about it because I'm like I should like him, but I just don't.
This might change your opinion of him because it's less of a comedy than it is a drama, and it's filmed like a stage play, and so super weird distribution model for it. He just like released episodes on his website, so you can't find it on like Netflix or any kind of distribution model. You just pay for the episodes and watch them. I think
we talked about this before.
Didn't we mention it?
Yeah, it's just like, okay, you take a guy who I don't really like and then
makes you pay for it, and then
and I've got like I just started a new book, and I'm like, I want to go read. I don't want to go and
Ryan Marnane argues that this show is like a masterpiece of literature. And I tend to agree with him that it's quite strong, so it might be worth checking out. Horace and Pete. Stranger Things was like a huge phenomenon this year. I quite liked it. I thought it was fine. Did you get a chance to see that at all?
I started it, and I was like, this is really good. It's nostalgic. I like it. And I was like,
it is nostalgic.
I just didn't finish it. Sorry.
Yeah. If you grew up in the 80s or 70s, it's like you might like it.
I just felt like it was intentionally pulling at my heartstrings of nostalgia.
Yeah,
it was like there's no other reason for that show to exist other than like, hey, people who liked E.T. and all this other crap will like
the Goonies and stuff. Yeah, for sure. But there is an interesting thing in the OA. There's a scene where someone's watching a TV and it's Stranger Things on the TV. And so they're both Netflix original shows, and some people like wildly criticized the OA and Netflix for like cross promoting
product
their
placement.
products.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, when I saw it, I was like, I think that looks like Stranger Things, but I wasn't positive. It could have been any of those, like, you know, Stand By Me type movies. But yeah, anyways, a few other shows that have been around, but were continued to be strong, I thought, were The Americans, which is about Soviet spies who live in the States in the 80s. Show's rad. Transparent was a really good show, continued to be good. That show wins tons of awards all the time. The Affair is good. Rectify is good. And I recently watched Black Mirror. You've probably seen this stuff around too.
You know, again, it's on my list of stuff to watch someday, but
I found it really hit or miss. Like, some episodes were really solid. Like, there's one called San Junipero that explores, again, kind of afterlife consciousness, like a lot of the stuff we've talked about tonight. And there's one called Hated in the Nation, which is about, like, in the future, because bees go extinct, this company creates, like, robotic bees to pollinate, and then, like, a hacker gets into the bees, and then, like, crazy stuff goes down. So there's some really strong episodes, and, like, a lot of the themes they explore are quite interesting about, like, some of the dark places technology might take us if we let it. And then I find some episodes just, like, I just roll my eyes and, like, that was terrible, I wish I never watched that. It's just really, like, misanthropic without any redeeming factors whatsoever. So that was kind of the list of dramas. A couple good comedies this year I'll mention. Atlanta. Donald Glover from Community came out with a new show this year. It won best comedy last night at the Golden Globes. Super rad show. Check that out if you get a chance. And shows like Veep are good. Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Michael Schur does that show. New Girl, we mentioned Girls. And I will say the most disappointing thing for me in TV this year was that my favorite comedy show of all time, Nathan For You, did not have a season this year.
Oh.
Do you know this show, Nathan For You?
I think we've talked about it.
Oh my gosh, it's the best. I can't recommend it highly enough. It is a very specifically weird kind of humor where, like, you have to be okay with watching very uncomfortable social situations, because it's like a documentary style TV show. Yeah. So if you can hack that kind of comedy, it's going to be the best thing you'll ever see.
Yeah, and it's like stuff about, like, marketing campaigns.
Yeah.
Like, I can.
Yeah. It's like this Canadian guy, Nathan Fielder. He went actually to the university in Victoria here where I live now, and he gives, like, really off the wall business ideas to struggling small businesses, but the ideas are, like, properly absurd. And then the show is just watching, like, people, like, consent to his ideas. And admittedly, like, a lot of people that he works with are people who have English as a learning language, and they're, you know, they've immigrated to the US. So he does kind of take advantage of people in a way, which is maybe obviously not great, but man, that show just
like The Office
wrecks me.
Just like socially awkward, and like
totally
the stuff that happens in business situations. Like what I've seen of it, it's funny in that regard of just being extremely socially awkward.
Yeah,
just totally. Like your cringe-worthy moments, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely capitalizes on that vibe of humor, for sure. So there's my TV stuff, and any new board games for you, Matt? We can maybe wrap on this topic.
You know, I did get the for my kids, we got the Pokemon version of Monopoly.
Oh yeah.
So I'm looking forward to playing that.
What's Boardwalk?
I don't know, dude.
Please tell me it's Snorlax.
We're gonna have to go open it up now and look at it.
Cool.
It's literally like that though. There's I don't know what Park Place is, but it's like something like Blastoise. And then we also picked up Risk again and trying to get back into Risk.
Yeah.
So I also, first time in my life, I was at the park this summer, and I was just sitting there reading while my kids were playing at a picnic table, and a guy comes up to me and he sits down across from me and rolls out like a chess mat and just starts setting up a chess game. And I had my first like improv game of chess.
Oh yeah? Like, did he just set it up for just strangers to play against him?
No, just in front of me. Like, yes, but I mean, I was sitting there and he came and sat across from me and started setting up, like challenged me directly.
Oh, weird.
And I was sort of like, game on. And, but of course, like a dude who travels with a chessboard is
going to just wreck you, probably, right?
Just totally wipe the board with me.
Yeah, he's a grandmaster or something.
But it's put this fear in me where I'm like, okay, now I have to have more than like a couple openings. I need to know
Queen's Gambit.
I need to be prepared for this situation again. So I've gotten back into. I got out some of my old chess books and I've tried.
Oh, good, yeah.
Tried to get prepared for in case this ever happens again.
Oh, that's good. I mean, that is definitely a contingency that we all need to be prepared for in this life. Is the random guy.
Happened to me.
It could happen to anyone, man. Crazy.
What about you, Agricola? What else have you played?
Oh, Agricola. Yeah, I've played that game a couple times. I find it to be dizzying in terms of how many components and things there are going on with it. It's a game that you probably have to play quite a bit before you start feeling comfortable. But other than the aforementioned Netrunner, which is is sitting on the throne probably forever for me. But I got a game for Christmas called Codenames. There's a pictures version and a word version. I got the pictures version, and it's like a cooperative game where you have two teams against each other, and there's like a secret code on the board, and there's all these just kind of like weird pictures, and so there's a code master for each team, and they have like the solution for what the board actually represents, and they're trying to give clues to their teammate to uncover their agents on the board. And you get a lot of like really funny. You learn a lot about your friends in this game because you like learn about some of the weird connections that they make in their brain about how things relate to each other. So that's a really cool game to check out. And also I played a game called Secret Hitler a few weeks ago. And this is made by the same guys who did Cards Against Humanity.
Yes.
Which is like hugely popular. And also wildly inappropriate in some cases, but this game is more family friendly than that one, and it's very similar to games like The Resistance and Avalon and One Night Ultimate Werewolf, where you have like everyone gets a secret identity card at the start and you close your eyes, and then the bad guys get to open their eyes and look at each other, but one of the bad guys in this is Hitler, and so the liberals are trying to enact policies until they win or like figure out who Hitler is and then take him out, and the fascists are trying to enact their policies until they get to a certain point and win. So they're trying to make Hitler the chancellor basically. And so like this game, I've played one game of it, and it erupted into like several of the people playing with us, of our friends, like in tears, a lot of like serious emotional trauma. One person like kind of stormed out at the end, and it made me just think this game is amazing. If a game can just wreck people's psyches this hard, this has to be a compelling game.
Didn't someone ask you not to mention Trump ever again on this show?
Hitler being synonymous with Trump.
The fascist
secret
policies.
Trump.
The liberals.
That was unintentional, but maybe some overlap.
We don't want to trigger anyone with the secret Hitler.
Yeah. So those are my board games. I got some video games too, but I mean, probably most people who listen to this don't need to hear about video games, so they can get in touch with me on Twitter about that. Me and John Mango talk about video games a lot. So
you can tweet those out or
sure.
Link to them on the blog. By the way, we still have stickers if anyone wants a sticker.
Oh yeah, we got some left. Good. Cool. Are you out of Pale King bookmarks?
No, I still have a few of those as well.
Nice.
I've tried to send out a bunch of them. We've had a good response to the stickers. So
yeah,
if you want
great.
a Great Concavity sticker, let me know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like we said, I think it's been we've at least broken even with the stickers. So maybe we think about our next merchandising option. Give us your ideas if you have any.
Think about doing like a wheel cover if you have a Jeep. It'll say Great Concavity wheel cover.
Yeah, we got to think of ones that are thematic to things that are actually concave. So I'll brainstorm.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, that's good.
I'll work on brainstorming those. But yeah, we wanna say thank you so much to all of our listeners in the last year. It's been a really good year for the show. We put out 18 episodes in 2016, and we could not be more like blown away by how amazing this community is. And a huge thanks as well to all of our guests this year. You guys have truly kept the show, interesting and dynamic and worth coming back to. So thank you all for a great
I just met a ton of people through the podcast,
Totally. Yeah.
We've had so many great people just reach out to us, and we've kept corresponding with them, and it's just been a fantastic experience, like beyond my wildest dreams of how fun it's been. So
yeah. So we will continue strong in 2017. We have, I think, some pretty audacious ideas for what we want to do this year. We'll see if we can pull them off or not, but stay tuned. And thanks again for a great year. Matt, if people want to specifically get in touch with you on Twitter and Instagram, where do they find you at?
I'm at Matt Booker, Bucher, on Instagram and Twitter.
Nice.
And I will say you can also go to my website, mattbooker.com, and I have a thing up there where I have a list of somewhere on there, find me, of all of my social media. So I am like on everything, man. Like Wikipedia,
the ubiquity of Matt Booker,
Reddit, Milkshake, all kinds of stuff. Snapchat. You want to hit me on anything? Facebook.
Oh wow, you got Snapchat too. I've never dabbled there.
I only have a few friends on there, so maybe I need some more friend requests on Snapchat. But if you want to see all of my social media links, they're on my website, mattbooker.com. Awesome.
Very easy. On Twitter, I am Dave __ Laird. And on Instagram, I'm just at Dave Laird. And if you guys want to get in touch with the show specifically, we are at Concavity Show on Twitter, as well as on Instagram. And on email, you can hit us up at concavityshow@gmail.com. Mamacita, hear me now, I insist. Oh, you've gotta trust me when I say long for something better than this. Does their writing do something? Does it give you like an erection of the heart, as Wallace might say?
Okay.
I guess that's a very masculine metaphor. Sorry.